What movies have been made about famous artists?
Artists have been inspiring films for decades. The following is a short list of movies either about or inspired by artists. Exit through the gift shop. 2010, an intriguing documentary about the enigmatic street artist Banksy. Little Ashes. 2008, Robert Pattinson plays Salvador Dali in a film about the artist's relationships with filmmaker Luis Buñuel and writer Federico Garcia Lorca. Factory Girl, 2006. A dramatic look at Edie Sedgwick's relationship with Andy Warhol. Klimt. 2006, John Malkovich plays the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt. Modigliani, 2004. A dramatic romance that focuses on the rivalry between artists Modigliani and Picasso in Paris. The Girl with the Pearl Earring, 2003. A film inspired by a novel by Tracy Chevalier that was in turn inspired by the famous painting by Jan Vermeer. Frida. 2002, Salma Hayek and Alfred Molina star as Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, respectively. Pollock, 2000. Starring Ed Harris as abstract expressionist painter Jackson Pollock. Marcia Gay Harden won the Academy Award for her portrayal of Lee Krasna. Goya in Bordeaux. 1999, a dramatic Spanish-language film about the artist Francisco de Goya. Surviving Picasso. 1996, Anthony Hopkins stars as Pablo Picasso in this film about the women in his life. Basquiat. 1996, a biopic of the postmodernist artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. I Shot Andy Warhol. 1996, Lily Taylor stars as Valerie Solanese, who shot Andy Warhol in 1968. Vincent and Theo, 1990. Robert Altman directs this film about the relationship between brothers Vincent and Theo Van Gogh. Camille Claudel. 1988, a French film about sculptor Camille Claudel and her relationship with Auguste Rodin. Auberai, 1986. Donald Sutherland plays French artist Paul Gauguin.
What movies have been made about famous artists?
Artists have been inspiring films for decades. The following is a short list of movies either about or inspired by artists. Exit through the gift shop. 2010, an intriguing documentary about the enigmatic street artist Banksy. Little Ashes. 2008, Robert Pattinson plays Salvador Dali in a film about the artist's relationships with filmmaker Luis Buñuel and writer Federico Garcia Lorca. Factory Girl, 2006. A dramatic look at Edie Sedgwick's relationship with Andy Warhol. Klimt. 2006, John Malkovich plays the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt. Modigliani, 2004. A dramatic romance that focuses on the rivalry between artists Modigliani and Picasso in Paris. The Girl with the Pearl Earring, 2003. A film inspired by a novel by Tracy Chevalier that was in turn inspired by the famous painting by Jan Vermeer. Frida. 2002, Salma Hayek and Alfred Molina star as Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, respectively. Pollock, 2000. Starring Ed Harris as abstract expressionist painter Jackson Pollock. Marcia Gay Harden won the Academy Award for her portrayal of Lee Krasna, Goya in Bordeaux. 1999, a dramatic Spanish-language film about the artist Francisco de Goya. Surviving Picasso. 1996, Anthony Hopkins stars as Pablo Picasso in this film about the women in his life. Basquiat. 1996, a biopic of the postmodernist artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. I Shot Andy Warhol. 1996, Lily Taylor stars as Valerie Solanese, who shot Andy Warhol in 1968. Vincent and Theo, 1990. Robert Altman directs this film about the relationship between brothers Vincent and Theo Van Gogh. Camille Claudel. 1988, a French film about sculptor Camille Claudel and her relationship with Auguste Rodin. Auberai, 1986. Donald Sutherland plays French artist Paul Gauguin.
What is feminist art?
Feminist art began in the 1960s. Developing out of the politically and socially motivated women's liberation movement. The goal of feminist art was to reinterpret art history, which was deemed to be systematically sexist, and to promote women's contributions to art and culture. Women have been making art throughout history, and yet art made by women, for example, ceramics, jewelry, and textiles, has traditionally been categorized as a craft, which is held in less regard than so-called works of fine art, such as painting or sculpture. Feminist artists aim to raise the status of craft, much in the way that Renaissance artists aimed to raise the status of the artist during the 16th and 17th centuries. During the 1960s and 1970s, men were disproportionately represented by art galleries, and women artists formed their own groups and collective galleries to promote their work. Feminist art groups included War, Women Artists in Revolution, and the Feminist Art Program. Established by pioneering feminist artists Judy Chicago, 1939, and Miriam Shapiro, 1923, in Southern California. Artists who worked with the early feminist art movement were also associated with other movements and styles, including minimalism, conceptual art, and installation art.
What is the dinner party?
The Dinner Party, which first exhibited in 1979 and toured internationally, is a masterpiece of feminist art by artist Judy Chicago. The Dinner Party is a large work in the shape of an equilateral triangle, a symbol of femininity. Each length of the triangle is 48 feet long and each is set with 13 dinner settings. mirroring the number of place settings at the Last Supper. The 39 total place settings, which were individually designed. Honor 39 important women from history, from Egyptian Queen Hatshepsut to Virginia Woolf to Georgia O'Keeffe. A long, embroidered runner was made collaboratively by 100 women, under the direction of Chicago. And the triangle-shaped heritage floor, made of ceramic, includes the names of 999 women. The dinner party highlights the often forgotten role of women in history and celebrates women's creativity and artistic traditions. The piece is not without controversy, however. Some have criticized the work for its narrow scope, saying it communicates a predominantly white, heterosexual experience, among other things. Regardless, the dinner party makes a powerful feminist statement and is perhaps Judy Chicago's best-known work.
Who is Mariko Mori?
Mariko Mori, 1967, is a contemporary Japanese artist whose work includes videos, photographs, and installations, such as Tom Nahu, 2006, a high-tech, monolithic structure whose light changes and blinks as it reacts to information recorded by the Super Kamiokanda Neutrino Observatory in Tokyo. Mori's work is often influenced by technology and Buddhism.
Who was Diego Rivera?
Diego Rivera, 1886 to 1957. Was an internationally renowned Mexican artist known for creating monumental public murals. Like Picasso, who he met while studying in Europe, Rivera was a child prodigy. During his early career, he went through a synthetic cubist phase. However, his mature style is characterized by large, figurative murals. Diego Rivera, along with other important Mexican artists such as José Clemente Orozco and David Alfaro Siqueiros, aimed to create a new national art for Mexico. He studied frescoes in Italy and applied the technique to his murals, such as his series of Mexican history paintings at the Palacio Nacional, National Palace, in Mexico City, which blends European with Mayan and Aztec styles and features rich, bold colors and simplified forms. Rivera also completed murals in the United States, including his depiction of Detroit industry, 1932 to 1933, at the Detroit Institute of Art. A vocal communist, Rivera's politics sometimes caused criticism in America. While working on a commission from the Rockefeller family in New York, for example, Rivera planned to add a portrait of Russian leader Vladimir Lenin. The Rockefellers refused, paid Rivera's fee, and destroyed his unfinished mural. Rivera ended up completing a different version of the mural, called Man, Controller of the Universe, 1934, at the Museo del Palacio de Bellas Artes, Museum of Fine Art, which is one of Rivera's most celebrated works.
What is magic realism?
First coined in 1925 by the German art critic Franz Roh. Magic realism flourished from the 1920s to the 1950s. Magic realism can be described as a realistic approach 228 to fantastical subject matter. Artists most associated with the style include American artists Yvonne Albright, 1897 to 1983, and Peter Bloom, 1906 to 1992, as well as French artists Paul Delvaux, 1897 to 1994, and René Magritte, 1898 to 1967. Who was probably the most famous magic realist painter, but is usually categorized as a surrealist. The works of these artists are characterized by a sense of mystery juxtaposed with the normalcy of everyday objects.
Who was Francis Bacon?
Francis Bacon, 1909 to 1992, was a British painter whose expressive, figurative works often depict scenes of psychological horror. Bacon is often categorized as an existentialist artist. His paintings of Pope Innocent X were modeled after a portrait done by Velázquez in the 16th century. However, Bacon's Pope sits within the confines of a cage-like throne. His face smeared with aggressive streaks of paint against a menacingly black background. Bacon's paintings depict intense scenes of anguish. The artist himself said, "I hope to make the best human cry in painting. To remake the violence of reality itself," as quoted in Stockstad 1128.
Are there any good documentaries about art?
There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of documentaries about art and artists. One of the best recent documentaries is Simon Schama's Power of Art, 2006, series, which does an excellent, and very entertaining, job of explaining the work of famous artists throughout history from the Renaissance to the 20th century. The PBS series Art, 21 is unparalleled in its presentation of art in the 21st century. Each episode of Art, 21, which is organized by theme, provides a look into the minds, and usually the studios, of artists working today. For a mix of Western and non-Western art, the series Art Through Time. A global view is also presented thematically, and includes information from art historians from around the world. It is often shown on local PBS stations. Check your local listings.
Who was Amelia Pelles?
Amelia Pelles, 1896 to 1968. was an important Cuban artist whose modernist paintings visually explore Cuban identity. Pelé studied art in both Cuba and Paris, where she was inspired by Cubism and constructivism. Especially the work of Russian artist Alexandra Ixter. Her paintings are flat and boldly colored, with black outlines, and are reminiscent of the tropical climate of Cuba. During her later career, Pelés worked on ceramics and murals. Examples of her work include Mar Pacifico, Hibiscus, 1943, Nina con Paloma. Girl with a Dove, 1947, and numerous untitled works and sculptures.
Who is Ai Weiwei?
Ai Weiwei, 1957, is a Chinese contemporary artist and political activist known for working in a variety of media, including painting, sculpture, and installations. Weiwei, who has shown his work internationally, was arrested by Chinese police in 2011 and detained for tax evasion, and has since not been allowed to leave the country or speak publicly about his arrest. Ai Weiwei's work is often political, contemplative, and humorous. Many of his works, such as his Colored Vases, 2006, series, evoke a sense of emptiness.
Who is Yinka Shoni Bear, MBE?
Yinka Shonibare, 1962, is a British Nigerian artist whose work takes many forms, including video, photography, installation, and performance. Some of his most well-known work questions racial identity and relationships between cultures in a post-colonial world. His sculptural work, Scramble for Africa, 2003, depicts headless European leaders dressed in European-style clothes made with African-printed fabrics as they divide up the resources of the continent amongst themselves. He was made a member of the British Empire, MBE, by Britain's Queen Elizabeth II in 2005.
What is muralismo?
Muralismo, or Mexican muralism, is an art movement that developed in the 1920s. Muralismo was characterized by socially aware, nationalistic murals that glorified Mexican history and cultural traditions after a period of political upheaval following the overthrow of the Mexican dictator, General Porfirio Diaz. Three key figures of the movement were Diego Rivera, 1886 to 1957, José Clement Orozco, 1883 to 1949, and David Alfaro Siqueiros, 1896 to 1974. Murals were commissioned by the new government for public spaces such as schools, churches, and government buildings as a celebration of Mexican nationalism and with the idea that art should be accessible to all.
Can a video game be a work of art?
All works of art, but perhaps most obviously installation art, rely upon the participation of viewer to generate meaning. When you go to a gallery and look the art, your thoughts and experiences affect the meaning of the art you see and interpret. This exchange is naturally extended to the concept of gameplay and video games. Game theory and game art have been a fruitful source of artistic exploration for years. In 2001, the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art exhibited Game Show. And in 2012 the Smithsonian American Art Museum held a show called, The Art of Video Games. The show's curator, Chris Melisinos, explained that through the video game medium, we are invited by the artist to inject our own morality, our own worldview, our own experiences into the game as we play it. And what comes out is wholly different from everybody that experiences it, the art of video games. Like other forms of digital art, video game art is very young. And generations of innovative artists will likely mine the medium for its theoretical and aesthetic potential in the years to come.
What is photorealism?
Photorealism, also called superrealism, sharp focus realism, and hyperrealism, developed in the 1970s as an extension of minimalism and pop art. It can even be considered a great-grandchild to precisionism. Photorealistic paintings were influenced by photographic and media images, and like pop art, often feature impersonal, even banal subject matter inspired by everyday life. American photorealist artist Chuck Close, 1940, makes paintings so realistic that they seem like photographs by using a photo as a reference and painting his image on a grid with an airbrush. The artist Audrey Flack, 1931, creates photorealistic still life paintings that recall Baroque Vanitas paintings. Photorealism often relies on trompe-l'oeil, which means trick of the eye to communicate meaning and comment on social, political, and cultural themes. Other artists associated with photorealism include Robert Bechtel, 1932, Richard Estes, 1932, and British artist Malcolm Morley, 1931.
What is Afri-Cobra?
Afri-Cobra, an artists' collective founded in Chicago in 1968, stands for African Commune of bad relevant artists and developed out of the earlier group OBAC, or Organization of Black American Culture, a multidisciplinary group of writers, historians, and artists. The group of artists who were painters, photographers, printmakers, fiber artists, and sculptors included Jeff Donaldson, 1932 to 2004, Wadsworth Jarrell, 1929, Barbara Jones Hagu, 1938, and others. It emphasized collaboration and explored African American identity and artistic heritage. In work that was often brightly colored, figurative, and focused on social themes. Donaldson, Jarrell, and other members of OBAC worked together to create the Wall of Respect, a mural painted on the south side of Chicago in 1967 to promote civil rights and community involvement. In 1973, the city of Chicago razed the building upon which the mural was painted. But the work spurred on similar politically minded mural projects both in the city and internationally.
What is the difference between action painting and color field painting?
Action painting is a type of abstract expressionism with close ties to surrealist automatism. It is sometimes also called gestural painting or gestural abstraction. Action painting is improvisational and emphasizes uncontrolled creativity and the process of painting itself. The three main artists associated with action painting are Willem de Kooning, Franz Klein, and Jackson Pollock, whose works emphasize the physical nature of their creation through large, often frenetic brush strokes, visible paint drips, and aggressive style. For example, Jackson Pollock painted Eyes in Heat, 1946. By squeezing liquid paint directly onto the canvas from the tube and then smearing it. The result is a highly textured canvas filled with swirling painted forms. Color field painting is somewhat less aggressive than action painting, though no less emotionally impactful. Color field painting is characterized by large, abstract areas of solid color. As seen in the work of Mark Rothko, Barnett Newman, Robert Motherwell, Clifford Still, and Helen Frankenthaler. Helen Frankenthaler even stained her canvases with color. Both action painters and color field painters believed that their works were in no way devoid of subject matter, but that color and action were essential to creative expression.
Who is Gabriel Orozco?
Gabriel Orozco, 1962, is a Mexican artist from Jalapa, Veracruz, whose work, including sculpture, photographs, and installations, often subtly alters found objects and is intellectually complex. For example, in the early 1990s, Orozco chopped up a Citroën DS automobile and reduced its width by 2/3. Making us think differently about commonly perceived objects.
What is abstract expressionism?
Abstract expressionism, which lasted from the 1940s to the 1960s, was an American movement influenced by European modernism, surrealism, and non-Western art traditions. Surrealist principles of psychic automatism were particularly influential. as was the influence of psychology and mythology. Abstract expressionist paintings tend to be very large and intense, and feature dynamic, bold colors. For many abstract expressionist artists, the creative process itself was as important as the work. Abstraction expressionist paintings do not represent a specific visible subject, but they do communicate emotions and other less tangible subjects. Artists labeled as abstract expressionists were diverse in their approach and styles. The movement can be divided into multiple categories and sub-styles. The most prominent being action painting and color field painting.
Who is Faith Ringgold?
Faith Ringgold, 1930, is an African-American artist from Harlem known for her paintings, story quilts, and soft sculpture. She was inspired by traditions and styles of African art, and her work explores racial and gender identities as well as civil rights issues. She has been called a fiber artist, but her choice of media is diverse. In 1967 she painted Advent of Black Power, an image from her American People series, which was featured on a U.S. postage stamp, and later she was a member of the Black Women's Artist Collective, Where We At. Ringgold, who was inspired by Tibetan Thankas, began making story quilts in the 1980s. Her best-known story quilt is Tar Beach, 1988, which was also made into a picture book in 1991. Tar Beach visually narrates the story of 8-year-old Cassie Louise Lightfoot, whose father is a union worker, and the way in which her imagination allows her to fly while on her Harlem rooftop. The text of the story, a version of which became the book, is written around the border of the quilt.
Who was Alberto Giacometti?
Alberto Giacometti, 1901 to 1966. Was a sculptor and painter born in the Italian-speaking portion of Switzerland. During his early career, he gained critical acclaim for his surrealist sculpture, and he was a formal member of the Surrealists until he left in the 1930s. Giacometti was inspired by the philosophy of existentialism and was friends with the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, who even wrote a catalogue preface for one of Giacometti's Paris shows. His now iconic sculptures of bronze, skeletal human figures have been interpreted in relation to the state of society after the devastation of World War II. Interested in the experience of perception, Giacometti's lurching sculptures have also been described as shadows of the human form. In recent art auctions, his work has fetched tens of millions of dollars.
What is postmodernism?
Postmodernism is a complicated term and a complicated theory. which can be applied to art, architecture, literature, philosophy, and more. Literally meaning after modernism, postmodernism has been described as everything from a rejection of modernism to a critique of modernism, to a new phase of it. So, postmodernism is either anti-modernism, or just more of it. Either way, postmodernism is defined in relation to its earlier counterpart. If modernism is unified and serious, then postmodernism is varied and playful. If modernism is a search for absolute truth, then postmodernism is a declaration that there is no such thing. Postmodernism began to be recognized as an approach to art starting in the 1970s, and is perhaps most easily recognized in architecture. A good example of modernist architecture is Gerrit Rietveld's Schroeder House, 1924, which was designed with a uniform style, complete with coordinating furniture and interior design. By contrast, the Piazza d'Italia in New Orleans, designed in 1975, reflects the influence of various styles of architecture from Renaissance to Baroque to modernism and is made up of a multitude of forms and colors. Where Schroeder House was stylistically unified, the Piazza d'Italia is stylistically diverse.
What is process art?
Process art is art that explores the act of producing art, and is often less concerned with the object or work that is eventually produced. The process art movement began in the 1960s and can be seen in the paintings of abstract expressionist Jackson Pollock, which were at least in part defined by the process through which he made them, the drip and splatter process. Other art movements also have overlaps with process art, including earthworks, land art, because of the way in which the environment acts upon them after they are created. The often monumental yet minimalist work of American sculptor Richard Serra, 1939, is a good example of process art. His steel sculptures encourage viewers to think about the nature of the materials and the way in which they were put together. What at first seems simple, a tall, tower-like slab of steel, for example, becomes a curiosity as one contemplates how
What is existentialist art?
after World War II, European artists, writers, and thinkers struggled to come to terms with not only the physical destruction wrought by war, but with its psychological toll. Existentialism was a philosophical response popularized by French thinkers such as Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 to 1980, whose treatise Being and Nothingness, 1943, described the anxiety and meaninglessness of existence, as well as the pursuit of authenticity in life. Existentialism was a powerful influence on post-war art in Europe, and its themes were explored by artists such as Francis Bacon, Alberto Giacometti, and Jean Dubuffet.
Who is Shireen Neshat?
Shireen Neshat, 1957, is an Iranian-American photographer and video artist whose photographs frequently explore stereotypes of Muslim women. Her later video work, including Tuba, 2002, and Logic of the Birds, 2002, explores spiritual themes through Quranic symbolism and music.
Who are some of the important international artists working today?
The contemporary art world is increasingly international in scope, and a number of artists from around the world have achieved critical acclaim and success. The following is a short list of some of these artists.
Who was Frida Kahlo?
Frida Kahlo, 1907 to 1954, may have been married to Diego Rivera, but her style of painting was highly individual and eschewed the monumentality of many of her male counterparts who were part of the Mexican muralist movement. Kahlo's autobiographical self-portraits had more in common with miniature paintings, and she was highly influenced by Mexican folk painting. Although not officially considered a surrealist, many of her paintings focus on themes of emotion and psychology through slightly disturbing, dreamlike imagery. Her painting, The Two Fridas, 1939, depicts two seated self-portraits. One dressed in a European-style dress and the other in traditional Mexico clothing. Representing her dual heritage, her father was German and her mother was Mexican. The anatomically detailed hearts of both Fridas can be seen through their chests, each connected with a long, thin blood vessel that wraps around them. The Frida on the left holds a pair of scissors and she cuts the vessel, blood spilling from the tip. This is thought to represent both Aztec sacrifice and the lifelong pain she suffered after a traumatic bus accident in 1925. Other famous works by Kahlo include Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace, 1940, and Self-Portrait on the Border Between Mexico and the United States, 1932.
Who was Sol Solar?
Sol Solar was the pseudonym of Argentinian avant-garde artist Oscar Agustin Alejandro Schultz Solari, 1887 to 1963. In Latin, the word for light is lux, the reverse of which became his name. Much of Sol Solar's work is either unknown or unseen by the public, as he worked on small watercolor paintings that were rarely exhibited during his lifetime. His work is indebted to European modernism, and Solar was particularly influenced by Paul Klee. But it is also infused with the artist's personal interest in mysticism and indigenous culture. Paintings such as Hafa, Patronus, 1923, are brightly colored and incorporate figurative imagery with abstract form and symbols, such as numbers and the Jewish Star of David. Sol Solar's work, which also included sculpture and writing, is an example of the ways in which Latin American artists took European modernism and made it their own.
What are some of the important concepts of postmodernism?
Understanding some of the key terms of postmodernism will help to get a grasp of what it is that postmodern artists do. Pluralism. Postmodern art is not just varied, it is pluralistic. Meaning it reflects the perspectives of many different ethnic, racial, religious, gender, and sexual groups. Postmodern art is also pluralistic because it reflects many different artistic styles, and often incorporates features of various art movements from the past and present. Appropriation. Postmodern art often copies or borrows elements and images from other works of art to form something new. Consider contemporary television comedies such as The Simpsons and Family Guy. These shows frequently refer to, or parody, other television shows or elements of popular culture. Familiarity with these references is essential in order to get the joke. Deconstruction. Postmodern deconstruction is a method of taking apart a unified whole to expose its underlying structure. It is used as a form of analysis or interpretation. It is popular amongst postmodern artists who are suspicious of the uniformity and overarching structure of modernism. In this way, postmodernism is like the child who continues to ask why. Kitsch. Many postmodern artists challenge the distinction between good and bad taste. The word kitsch traditionally refers to ugly objects that reflect bad taste, such as souvenirs, or overly sentimental objects. Examples of kitsch include decorative garden gnomes, or plates decorated with the images of the British royal family. Postmodern artists embrace kitsch and frequently incorporate kitsch into their work.
Where can I see art in my area?
Art is all around us, especially if you are looking for it. Be sure to check out local galleries and museums, which usually have both permanent collections and temporary exhibitions that change regularly. Cafes, bookstores, and frame shops also often hang original art by local artists on the walls and sometimes have talks about art. These are great places to meet other people who are interested in art, especially during the summer months. Arts and crafts fairs and festivals are frequently held in downtowns, parks, and fairgrounds. Search online or stop in at your local arts and crafts store, gallery, or cafe, which might have some information on upcoming art events. I want to learn more.
What movies have been made about famous artists?
Artists have been inspiring films for decades. The following is a short list of movies either about or inspired by artists. Exit through the gift shop. 2010, an intriguing documentary about the enigmatic street artist Banksy. Little Ashes. 2008, Robert Pattinson plays Salvador Dali in a film about the artist's relationships with filmmaker Luis Buñuel and writer Federico Garcia Lorca. Factory Girl, 2006. A dramatic look at Edie Sedgwick's relationship with Andy Warhol. Klimt. 2006, John Malkovich plays the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt. Modigliani, 2004. A dramatic romance that focuses on the rivalry between artists Modigliani and Picasso in Paris. The Girl with the Pearl Earring, 2003. A film inspired by a novel by Tracy Chevalier that was in turn inspired by the famous painting by Jan Vermeer. Frida. 2002, Salma Hayek and Alfred Molina star as Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, respectively. Pollock, 2000. Starring Ed Harris as abstract expressionist painter Jackson Pollock. Marcia Gay Harden won the Academy Award for her portrayal of Lee Krasna. Goya in Bordeaux. 1999, a dramatic Spanish-language film about the artist Francisco de Goya. Surviving Picasso. 1996, Anthony Hopkins stars as Pablo Picasso in this film about the women in his life. Basquiat. 1996, a biopic of the postmodernist artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. I Shot Andy Warhol. 1996, Lily Taylor stars as Valerie Solanese, who shot Andy Warhol in 1968. Vincent and Theo, 1990. Robert Altman directs this film about the relationship between brothers Vincent and Theo Van Gogh. Camille Claudel. 1988, a French film about sculptor Camille Claudel and her relationship with Auguste Rodin. Auberai, 1986. Donald Sutherland plays French artist Paul Gauguin.
Who is Barbara Kruger?
Barbara Kruger, 1945. Is an American conceptual artist and graphic designer known for her photographic collages. As a student in New York City, she was taught by famed photographers Diane Arbus and Marvin Israel. And she later became a graphic designer at Harper's Bazaar and then chief designer at Mademoiselle. Kruger's work uses the power of mass media and advertisement to make her text and image pieces, which usually feature black and white images with bold, white on red text. Manipulating the power of slogans. Kruger's work broadcasts such messages as "I shop therefore I am" and "We don't need another hero." Her work also questions the traditionally passive role of women in art with her famous piece, Your Gaze Hits the Side of My Face, 1981, which depicts the profile view of a female sculpture along with the text. Kruger often uses personal pronouns such as I, you. and me so as to avoid gender associations and make her statements universal. Her later work often uses appropriated images, and more recently, she has begun creating installations. Kruger's style has been described as agitprop, a blend of the words agitation and propaganda. And 250 her work focuses on themes of feminism, consumerism, and identity.
What was Woman House?
Woman House was a 1971 art installation, performance piece, feminist collaboration. An actual house located at 553 Mariposa Avenue in Hollywood, California. The project was run by the Feminist Art Program at the California Institute of Arts. A group of 26 women repaired the home before a planned demolition, using their carpentry skills to transform it into a space for women-made art, and a work of art in and of itself. Woman House contained 18 installations within its rooms, including nurturant kitchen. Performances such as Waiting questioned the role of women as keepers of the house. The house opened to the public in 1972 and attracted nearly 10,000 visitors. When the exhibitions were complete, most of the art created there was destroyed, including the home.
Who were some of the abstract expressionists?
Willem de Kooning, 1904 to 1997. De Kooning was a Dutch immigrant to America, who greatly inspired the American artists he encountered in New York City. Considered part of the New York School of Abstract Expressionists. His work is characterized by aggressive brush strokes and partial abstraction. One of his most famous works is Woman I, 1950 to 1952, which he repeated a number of times. The painting depicts a large-eyed, aggressive woman with a wide, toothy smile and a wild, abstract form. The energy of de Kooning's work aligned the artist with action painters, and his work made a major impact on 20th-century American modernism. Arshile Gorky, 1905 to 1948. Gorky was an Armenian-American painter whose early Cubist Surrealist style influenced the abstract expressionists. His painting Garden in Sochi, c. 1943, shares similarities with the biomorphic abstraction of Henry Moore. Hans Hofmann, 1880 to 1966. Born in Germany, Hofmann was an art teacher who introduced a new American generation to European modernism. His work, as exemplified in The Gate, 1959 to 1960, is bold and colorful, and emphasizes visual structure and color relationships. Franz Klein, 1910 to 1962. Klein's work was large and he is particularly well known for his white canvases slashed with aggressive, black brush strokes. These works evoke Chinese calligraphy and draw attention to the dynamic power and structural qualities of the brush stroke. Robert Motherwell, 1915 to 1991. Motherwell was a member of the New York School and was inspired by Surrealist automatism and European modernism. He was a writer and a teacher, and had an intellectual approach to abstraction. He painted the series, Elegies to the Spanish Republic, throughout his long career. These works served as philosophical mediations on the nature of loss, death, and visual form. Lee Krasner, 1911 to 1984. Lee Krasner was an important abstract expressionist painter and the wife of Jackson Pollock. She was highly critical of her own work, even occasionally destroying finished pieces. She produced large, gestural paintings such as The Seasons, 1957. Barnett Newman, 1905 to 1970. Newman was an important color field painter whose work often features a zip or long, thin, vertical line of color painted against a boldly colored background. Newman's zip has been likened to an obelisk. Newman searched for the sublime through overwhelming fields of pure color. Jackson Pollock, 1912 to 1956. Pollock is one of the most enduringly popular abstract expressionists. Known for his aggressive painting style and technique of splattering paint directly onto the canvas. He laid his paintings flat on the ground, and walked over them with back bent, applying paint directly. While it seems like his paintings would be chaotic, their overall effect is often rhythmic and contemplative. Ad Reinhardt, 1913 to 1967. Reinhardt was known for making art as art, and emphasizing the separation between art and life. He distilled his paintings to a single color, and his later paintings are completely black, with no trace of a brush stroke. This was done in an attempt to completely separate the work from the act of its creation. Mark Rothko, 1903 to 1970. Rothko was interested in emotional and spiritual communication in his large color field paintings. The monumental canvases of Mark Rothko feature soft edge areas of rich color where different hues never quite touch one another, creating a tension Rothko linked to tension within human relations. Rothko's paintings are infused with spirituality and psychological ambiguity. Clyfford Still, 1904 to 1980. Still was also a color field painter. Though his works are more aggressive than Rothko's due to jagged areas of color, varied textures, and juxtaposed hues. His massive paintings have been equated with landscapes. Helen Frankenthaler, 1928 to 2011. Though she used oil and acrylic paint, Frankenthaler's large paintings have the look of watercolor, with stained canvas and large areas of fluid color. Staining produces an almost textureless open space within the canvas that garnered her the support of modernist critic, Clement Greenberg.
What does postmodern architecture look like?
Postmodern architecture is not necessarily a style, but an approach, therefore. Postmodern buildings will not necessarily look like one another, but may share some characteristics. One of the key postmodern architects is Robert Venturi, 1925. A Philadelphia-born architect who believed that the urban environment was too complex to be uniform. In 1966, he wrote Complexity and Contradiction, where he responded to modernist architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's statement, "Less is more," by declaring less is a bore. Venturi's architectural style is infused with various architectural styles from history. A good example is the Vanna Venturi house, completed in 1964 and built for the architect's mother. The Vanna Venturi house is at once complex and simple, serious and playful. It has a solid foundation and an angled roof, and evokes a sense of the traditional farmhouse but not quite. This ethereal lack of uniformity is characteristic of postmodernism. Frank Gehry is also a well-known postmodern architect who built the Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, which opened in 2003, and the Guggenheim Museum of Modern Art in Bilbao, Spain, in 1997. His work is often constructed of highly polished stainless steel made up of distorted planes that form a complex, curvilinear design, a chaotic style that can be described as deconstructivist.
What is the lightning field?
The lightning field, 1977, is an example of an earthwork, or land art, created by American sculptor Walter de Maria in western New Mexico. Built in the vast desert, de Maria installed 400 stainless steel poles with pointed tips in a grid-like pattern that reaches 1 mile by 1 kilometer in area. Each pole, at around 20 feet tall, is designed to attract lightning, as well as attract visitors. The lightning field can also be considered a sculpture or an installation, and it was designed to encourage visitors to walk amongst the poles and engage with the natural environment. This massively scaled example of land art can be visited by contacting the DIA Foundation, which manages the site.
Who is Mona Hatoum?
Mona Hatoum, 1952, is a Palestinian video and installation artist who was raised in Lebanon and works primarily in Britain. Hatoum's conceptual installations and performance pieces often communicate themes of exile and authority. Examples of her work include the minimalist Socle du Monde, Base of the World, 1992 to 1993. A large black cube that contrasts a metallic interior structure with a softer, more organic exterior embellishment.
Where can I find art resources online?
There are so many websites about art that looking up art online can turn into information overload. Here are a select few websites with a wealth of information on art, presented in a straightforward and often entertaining way. Heilbronn Timeline of Art History at the Metropolitan Museum of New York. http://www.metmuseum.org/toah. This incredibly detailed site combines detailed explanations of art movements and styles with explanations of specific works of art held in the museum's collection. It is a great resource for Western and non-Western art alike. If you can't make it to New York, looking at the Met Museum's timeline of art history is the next best thing. Google Art Project, http://www.googleartproject.com. A visit to Google Art Project is like stepping into a virtual museum. Roam the halls of the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, or the Tate Britain in London. Dozens of museums opened their doors to Google in 2011, allowing cameras to film their interiors in a manner similar to Google Street View. After broadening the project's scope in 2012, tens of thousands of works of art from around the world can be seen online through the Google Art Project. Smart History presented by the Khan Academy, http://smarthistory.khanacademy.org/. Smart History is a great place to learn more about art movements and specific works of art. The site provides written essays, and video and audio guides to some of the most famous paintings, sculptures, and works of architecture around the world. Recently, Smart History has made an effort to include non-Western art. Smart History multimedia presentations are engaging and highly informative.
Who is Jeff Koons?
Jeff Koons, 1955, is a controversial, highly successful contemporary artist known for monumental, brightly colored sculpture and art produced by large teams of assistants. A former commodities broker who trained at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and the Maryland Institute College of Art, Koons creates art that critiques commercialism. For example, he displayed vacuum cleaners in clear, perspex boxes, in a series called The New 1979, and later began making enormous, highly polished balloon animal sculptures that were praised for their technical virtuosity, and criticized for their over-the-top decadence. Koons is also famous for his large topiary sculpture, Puppy, 1992, and his Rococo-esque sculpture, Michael Jackson and Bubbles, 1988, a golden, ceramic sculpture of the king of pop with his pet monkey. Koons' art is polarizing because it blurs the line between high art and spectacle, which some say is exactly the point.
What is body art?
In body art, the artist's body becomes the medium. Body art overlaps with many other forms and styles, such as performance art. It became popular during the 1960s, likely as a reaction against the cold austerity of minimalism. Examples of body art include Bruce Naumann's photograph, Self-Portrait as a Fountain, 1966 to 1967. In which the artist's body takes on the characteristics of a fountain as water squirts from his mouth. An example of conceptual body art is Piero Manzoni's living sculpture, 1961, in which the artist signed the bodies of living women.
Who was Nam June Paik?
Nam June Paik, 1932 to 2006, was a Korean-American artist who worked in many different media, creating videotapes, paintings, sculptures, robots, laser installations, and writing. He is best known as an innovator in video art. Paik joined Fluxus while studying in Germany and was later inspired by the experimental composer and artist John Cage, who he met and befriended in 1958. Paik used the video as a structural component in his sculptures and installations. For example, he made a cello by stacking television sets and stringing them together with cello strings. He also made a bra out of 2 television screens in a work titled, TV Bra for Living Sculpture, 1969. Which he designed to be worn by cello player and collaborator, Charlotte Moorman, while she performed. Paik's video Flag X, 1985, is another example of video used in sculpture. A series of television screens are arranged in a grid pattern to display an image of the American flag.
What are earthworks?
Earthworks, also known as land art, are works of art made of natural materials such as earth, rocks, water, usually on an extremely large scale. Land art became popular in the 1960s. Earthworks have been linked to minimalism due to their inherent simplicity. And some scholars have called this form a reaction against consumerism because it is nearly impossible for anyone to buy or sell, or exhibit, land art. The most famous example of an earthwork is Spiral Jetty, built on Roselle Point in the Great Salt Lake in Utah in 1970 by artist Robert Smithson. Spiral Jetty is monumental indeed, a 1,500-foot-long embankment made of earth, mud, and basalt rocks that juts into the lake, periodically submerged due to the changing levels of the lake. Earthworks such as Spiral Jetty are built on such a large scale that they evoke the mystery and largesse of ancient monuments and sites such as Cahokia or Serpent Mound. Other examples of earthworks are Michael Heiser's Double Negative, 1969-70. Which was created by cutting the sides of a canyon wall in the Arizona desert, as well as Walter de Maria's Lightning Field, 1977.
What is OP art?
The op in op art refers to optical illusion and op art paintings. such as Bridget Riley's Metamorphosis, 1964, are composed of precise, geometric abstractions. Op art paintings pulse with an energy created by a strategic alignment of color and form, creating a blurring afterimage. Similar to the experience of looking at a bright light for too long, or looking into a funhouse mirror. Hungarian artist Viktor Vásárhelyi, 1908–1997, was a pioneer of op art. His commercial paintings of zebras, and their repetitious black and white stripes, served as early optic experimentations, while works such as the black and white supernovae, 1959–1961, are dynamic and restless. Vásárhelyi linked these works to free-moving kinetic art by artists such as Alexander Calder. The viewer is an essential part of the op art experience because without the viewer, specifically the viewer's perception, there can be no optical illusion. Op art serves as an inquiry into the very nature of optical perception, the experience of seeing things.
Who is Shirin Neshat?
Shirin Neshat, 1957, is an Iranian-American photographer and video artist whose photographs frequently explore stereotypes of Muslim women. Her later video work, including Tuba, 2002, and Logic of the Birds, 2002, explores spiritual themes through Quranic symbolism and music.
What is Artei Povera?
Artei Povera, meaning poor art or impoverished art, is a movement that emphasized the use of everyday objects and aims to broaden just what can be considered art. The term was invented by Italian artist German Celant in 1967 and is related to similar movements such as art informal. Artists associated with Artei Povera include Greek artist Janis Kounellis, 1933, as well as Italians Giulio Paolini, 1940, and Michelangelo Pistoletto, 1933. Pistoletto is famous for his Artei Povera work, Venus of the Rags, 1967, in which a glimmering sculpture of Venus, the goddess of love, with her back turned to the viewer, is juxtaposed with a large, colorful pile of rags. Kounellis also contrasts refined classicism with the everyday in his Untitled from 1978. In which fragments of a classical sculpture are held together with cord.
Who is Gabriel Orozco?
Gabriel Orozco, 1962, is a Mexican artist from Jalapa, Veracruz, whose work, including sculpture, photographs, and installations, often subtly alters found objects and is intellectually complex. For example, in the early 1990s, Orozco chopped up a Citroën DS automobile and reduced its width by 2/3. making us think differently about commonly perceived objects.
Who are some of the important international artists working today?
The contemporary art world is increasingly international in scope and in number. Of artists from around the world have achieved critical acclaim and success. The following is a short list of some of these artists.
What is minimalism?
Minimalism is a term that describes simple, geometric art that is often impersonal and made with a new set of materials, including aluminum, plexiglass, plywood, and steel. Minimalist artists attempted to distill their work into a pure form, editing any reference to personality, feelings, symbolism, or story. The style became popular during the mid-1960s, though many art critics at the time accused minimalism of being too cold, and questioned whether art could, or should, be produced by industrial means. The term minimalism has been used to describe the art of many artists. From Ad Reinhardt to Yves Klein, Frank Stella to Robert Rauschenberg. The work of artist Donald Judd, 1928 to 1994, is a good example of minimalism. Judd explored the difference between painting and sculpture with his series of wall structures. Judd's wall structures are composed of a series of machinematic rectangular forms that protrude from the wall. Forms that he called specific objects. The work of artist Anne Truitt, 1921 to 2004, occasionally blurred the line between minimalism and color field painting. However, her minimalist sculpture Grant 1963, a long wooden beam, painted in acrylic was a pure, impersonal, geometric form.